is it a criteria if the person is nice or if you get along with the person for you?
It's not actually.
Ah, voilà.
So that's one of the biases is kind of that first impression,
Yeah.
you know, and I can be very guilty of that because I've learned over the years I'm not great at first impressions. So that's why I like to talk to people to get to know them.
Ah, there we go.
Um,
Welcome to the Power Minds channel, your go-to channel for meeting inspirational people. And today it is my great pleasure to welcome Kristin from the United States. Hello, Kristin.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Very warm welcome to you and great that you coming on today. Kristin is actually an HR leadership coach and a really experienced power mind in all things leadership. And that's why she's here today to actually share with us some really exciting tips and tricks for becoming a better interviewer. And may I just say before we start, actually, this topic is so timely because, as we all know, the world of work has completely changed in the last couple of years. So finding talented people and actually interviewing them in such a way that you know if they fit the task you're recruiting them for, it has become such a crucial skill. So I really recommend that you all watch this video until the end because, Kristin, you're going to share some really powerful advice with us.
I hope
But
so.
thank you. But first of all, so that the viewers get to know you better, I'm going to ask you some personal questions.
Okay.
And just for the viewers, Kristin has worked more than 20 years in the industry as an HR consultant. So if she's going to give you advice, it's going to be really, foundational. Now, first of all, can you give us some outlook on your person? What is your most inspiring person? Somebody that inspired you for your career?
Oh my gosh, for my career, um, in my life is my dad for sure, because he's was a business owner and did and still does at 85 years old, works
Wow.
very, very hard. Yes, and because he loves to work. As far as my career goes, I chose the field of HR because I was in a job with PepsiCo actually, back in the 90s, and I admired our HR professional, the director of HR in my division, and the things that she was doing, her ability to kind of read a room and things that I was able to pick up from her, and that's kind of changed the trajectory of my career. She did. That's why I went
So
into
that was a
HR.
role model for you to, and
Yep.
this is actually also underlining why we all need role models. So I'm happy that you're here today.
Oh, thank you.
And
I've been very lucky and had some great HR professionals throughout my career, but she was the start.
great. And who was your, no, sorry, what is your most life-changing book? Like a book you would say, okay, dear people interested in HR, dear people interested in recruiting or in leadership in general, this
Mhm.
is one book you should all read.
I've been thinking about this, and there's so many great books out there to narrow it down just to one. But I think for me, what changes the game for HR, for leadership, and just people being, the ability to have an effective conversation is the book Crucial Conversations.
Right.
It's just such a great book that gives you so many tips and skills on how to, initiate the conversation, especially when it's a difficult conversation, how to navigate the people in the room, how to get everybody kind of together and work towards the goal.
Ah,
When
yes,
there's,
I know what you're
it's
saying. That is facilitating. Yes.
yeah, to
Crucial
get
skills, right?
the kind of the anger out of the way and get back towards why we're all here. So I think that
Mhm.
book is just so critical. It taught me so much about how to have a conversation. Um, as far as leadership goes, I think Lead from the Heart is a great book on how leadership has changed and evolved over the years, and has left the kind of iron-fisted style of management and gone to leading with more empathy and
Ah,
compassion.
right. Yes,
So
definitely.
I think those two books are really, really critical to
Oh,
be
thank you
effective in
for that.
leadership.
I'm gonna,
Yes.
with pleasure, link them in the description because I join you on that. I watched that as well, this movement from what I would describe a more authoritative style at the beginning of my career to now people are becoming far more aware that it's important to be empathetic.
Yes, yes. And I think Mark Crowley, who wrote Lead from the Heart, did a great job of kind of transitioning from the way things were to how they are now, and what people in the workforce want. The workforce has changed from when I started in it to what it is now. And so people want different things and they want to be led differently. And I think he does a nice
Oh,
job
yes.
of laying that out. So
Expectations. That is a
yes.
very important thing to underline. The expectations of the workforce is completely different than it was maybe 30 years ago, definitely.
Yep, yep.
May I
People
just
work
ask
differently.
you? Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. What would you say is the top different expectation nowadays, where you say, okay, people just expect that when they join a new company?
I think, years ago, we went to work, we were given an assignment, we did our assignment, and that was it. That was the expectation. People want more out of their work. They want to feel more job satisfaction. They want to know that there's opportunity to advance and to grow. They want to be challenged. They want it to be meaningful. So
Ah,
I think when, if you're just given an assignment, and you're left to go do it, it there's nothing kind of, there's no meat in that. There's no backbone there. They want more robust employment experience, I think, nowadays. And I think, some of that has to do is making sure you have the right people in the right roles.
hmm.
But I also think that people are just have a different expectation of work. They certainly aren't going to work in an environment where, it's like, do this because I said so. They want to understand why they're
Yes,
doing what they're doing and
I've
what the
experienced that as
impact.
well. And
Yes.
they will definitely expect some sort, no matter which role, they will expect some sort of, as you said, meaning, some sort of purpose, and they will not just do it because the boss or yeah, the superior has said so, as you say, yeah, different expectation.
Yep. I'm
That's
really big on making sure people understand why they're doing what they're doing. I think that it's easier to be engaged if you get how it's going to impact the bigger picture.
absolutely,
So
definitely. Now, another and final question on you as a person. What is your essential tool? Some tool that you would never want to miss in your life?
I think probably for me, uh, I'm pretty good at reading a room and understanding what people need. I don't think that happened. I think that's years and years of talking with
Experience.
people and experience, and kind of, some people just want to be heard, and that's great.
Hmm.
I'm happy to listen. I'm very big on listening with intent, as opposed to, you see the quote, listening with intent versus listening to respond, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Truly listening to what people have to say.
So
What?
listening as a tool, yeah, that's interesting
Yeah.
because also I would join you on that. It's one of the most underrated skills nowadays to listen. It's actually quite hard, you know.
Yes.
Since I
Yeah.
run this channel, I practice myself to just listen, and it's harder than talking, definitely.
Well, because you want to be prepared for what's next, but you also want to hear what people have to say.
Yes.
And I think when you work in an HR environment, especially, you have to listen to what people have to say. So I didn't know that when I started my HR career.
Hmm.
I was just like everybody else. You go in there and you get things done. I learned over the years that you really go a lot further if you just take a few minutes to listen to people. So
To the person.
I,
Yeah, let's try to figure out the quote. I knew that quote as well. It's like instead of listening in order to respond, it is listening in order to understand. I think it was like
I,
that.
I think you're with intent to understand. I think you're absolutely right.
Yes. And I will
Yes.
quote that in the description for the viewers because I love that quote. It's a fundamental one and it's so difficult. I have to say as well, after many years, it's so difficult. But if we remind ourselves on a daily basis, okay, I have this person, I have you here now, Kristin, I listen to you with intent to understand you. It actually helps to put your mind to that, doesn't it?
It does. And practice. I
Yes.
think that's one of the things they teach in crucial conversations is the more you do things, the better you get at it. So I think it's practice. And then I think once you start seeing the value that it brings,
Hmm.
it, it becomes like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll listen for a minute. But I think you nailed it. I think listening is underrated.
Yeah.
I,
People think,
you
oh, it's
know,
just that. Like so
yeah, we
many.
all listen. Everybody listens.
Yeah.
No, not really.
And then they usually start to say, okay, yeah, that's fine, but let's talk about this important tool of how listening will be much easier. And then they introduce the software. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. No, not
Yeah.
that.
And I actually realized the one thing I need to actually in my personal self-growth and development is not to become cynical just because I have experience, right? That's another story about
Yeah,
myself. So
same, by the
close.
way. But I think that got better the longer I was away from my job. Now that I've been away from my job for about a year and a half,
Oh,
and
right.
I
That's
have,
reassuring.
yeah, I have the ability to be a little less cynical. And when I first walked out of there, it was tough.
Yeah,
So give it some
absolutely.
time.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, that's a nice build up for what you shared with me before the interview. And I want to share that with the viewers. You actually said you had in your years of experience as an HR consultant, you have witnessed or you have actually been in so many interviews where you watched leaders and it drove you actually nuts that they have not done one thing. And we will share that at the end of the video. So that is important that we don't forget about that. But now let's dive right into the topic. So how to
Okay.
become a better interviewer. What is actually your yeah, let's call it like that. What is your mission when you consult leaders to interview? What is your mission? What you want to share with them and let them know that they need to know about this skill?
Well, I think first and foremost, we're constantly putting pressure on leaders to build great teams. That's part of their job is to build great teams, successful teams. In order to build great teams, you have to know how to hire great people. And to hire great people, you have to become a better interviewer. You have to know how to interview. And interviewing is a skill. Um, People don't talk about it much. It's assumed that everyone knows how to interview. It's not taught. It's not taught in college. It's not taught in work. Some companies may say, "Here's a list of interview questions we want you to ask," but they don't really
The
teach
how
you
to is not there.
how
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
ask and how to really kind of understand your candidates and the role that you're filling. You have to understand the role that you're filling as well. So to match the two, you have to understand both.
Right. So your mission is basically then to do that training, right? You train leaders in how to do it, actually, how to interview. And I guess also you
Yes.
are practicing with them.
Yes. So I'm working on a book, kind of a how-to book.
Oh,
Should come
wow.
out here in the next, I'm hoping in the next maybe 6 weeks or so.
Oh, wow, that
Um,
is great.
yeah,
We
I'm
will
very
add that
excited
one in
about
the
it.
video description.
I'm very excited about it, and it's basically what needs to happen in an interview in the interview process.
Hmm.
And it's not so much specifically my way. It's because I think we all do it our own way, but there are
Hmm.
steps and there are things you need to understand to be effective at interviewing. If you
Hmm.
want to hire great people, you have to conduct effective interviews so you can select great talent. So
Oh, wow.
that's
Okay, so
yes.
this book we're even gonna do a second interview when this book is coming out because
Oh,
I'm
great.
excited
That would be
now.
great. I would love to.
That
I
is
would love to.
excellent. And so, in your consulting sessions with the leaders, basically, do you also do like a mise en scène? Like, do you put them in a situation and you let them practice it, or how does it work when somebody comes to you? Can you help me become a better interviewer? What do you do?
Mhm. Well, for me, it's more about providing a framework.
Hmm.
And I will provide samples and examples and kind of how to and steps to take. But in the end, I think you need to build your interview process around your personality, around your role, around just who you are as a person. What I
Mhm.
do is going to be very different from what you do because we're different people, and that's perfectly okay. But
Right,
make sure you understand the steps that need to be included regardless of who you are and how you build it. So
right.
I think that we would all ask different questions. I think we all seek different skill sets depending on the role, of course. What's important to me for, say, an engineer might be different than what's important to you for an engineer. And that's
Mhm.
okay, as long as we are conducting effective interviews to fill our open positions.
Right. Okay. So what would you say is like, from your experience, what is the worst thing one can do in an interview?
The worst thing they can do is just sit and have a conversation like we're doing.
Right.
Um,
All
just
right.
or the I go back and forth between the sitting and having a conversation or rushing through the process, because I
Right.
think if you rush the process you will make a bad decision
Okay.
or could make a bad decision.
So on average, what would you recommend? How much time do people have to set aside for good interview?
Mhm.
Minimum?
um I think that can vary, and that's going to vary by candidate too. Some candidates are more talkative than others.
Hmm.
I think um 30 minutes on an average is probably good. And that would probably vary anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes. You know, I've had interviews go 15 minutes and I've had them go over an hour.
Right.
So there's a broad spectrum, but one of the things I emphasize in the book is committing the time to the process, and people are
Hmm.
busy. So in order to commit the
Mm,
time to the process, schedule it and then hold yourself to that schedule.
yes.
Also give yourself a little bit of flexibility, so um if you don't commit the time and schedule it, you will rush through it and then you won't be effective.
Because in a sense, if I understand you correctly, what will happen is that you don't really have time to first of all get to know the person, listen to the person, and to see if that person will, as you say, be a good fit for the team, right?
Hmm. Yep. And you'll be distracted by all the other things you have to get done.
Hmm.
If you don't really commit the time to this process, all these other things that are hanging out there, and they're all legitimate things. I'm not
Hmm.
undermining that in any way. They all need to get done, but you don't want to get these things done and compromise the
Yeah.
process of interviewing.
Yeah, and then also the future of the team, because if there's a misfit, oh my
Exactly.
God. So can I just
Exactly.
ask you from my experience? I once did this interview, and the person was actually a quite sympathetic person. I actually, in my mind, was always like, what is it that is disturbing me? Because I had a thing that was disturbing me, and the person was nice. And I was actually later thinking, actually, it's not, is it a criteria if the person is nice or if you get along with the person for you?
It's not actually.
Ah, voilà. Yeah, I was thinking the same. I should not go by sympathy, shouldn't I?
Yeah, no, I think I think you definitely want to go with your gut. I think, we get a lot of internal intuition when we're talking to people about what we want and don't want, but I don't necessarily care that we're going to be best friends. I care that you're going to be really great at the job and that you can work with the other people on the team. So,
So this
I don't want to
communicative
hire
skill.
someone that I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the skill of communication, right, with the
Mhm.
team, that kind of thing is important.
Sure. And I think in my book I use the example of like, for example, an engineer, they often work very independently, and their interaction may be far less than, say, a salesperson
Mm-hmm.
who who's going to have a much larger personality with and be more dynamic. So you also have to, that's why understanding the role that you're filling is important.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it doesn't matter if your engineer can talk to everybody in the building. They don't
Mm-hmm.
really need to, but
Mm-hmm.
your salespeople, they need to be able to have a good conversation. So, it's just understanding the process.
Right. And what do you actually recommend if, for example, if I was to interview now an engineer, and I realize certain things I need to ask. It's out of my experience because I'm not from engineering. What would you recommend to leaders there? Should they consult with somebody from the engineering department before? What are crucial questions to ask if the person from the engineering department can't be there? Or how would you go about that? Because asking questions about a field that is not really your field of experience, that is what I found hard. You know, sometimes you need to recruit for a field, it's not really your experience.
Right. That's such a legitimate question. And that took me a while to learn when I was interviewing candidates in my former role, because I interviewed all professional level positions. I would be engineering or project managers or sales, estimating, accounting and finance. So I'm not an expert in all of those things. So for me, I took the approach of understanding them as a person and their work ethic and their commitment to the company, their ability to have a conversation with other people. What's the necessity of them to be able to have that conversation? Do we even care? So I didn't necessarily get into the meat of that technical piece of it, because I truly believe that a technical person has to ask and dive into the technical aspect of it. Now, if you're a small business owner and you're like, I need an engineer, I would like to think that you would have some understanding of what you need. But if not, I would definitely do some research, just,
to get some keywords maybe, or
yeah.
Right.
But that's, I mean, there are a lot of great things about the internet and there's a lot of bad things about the internet. But one of the great things is that it's very easy to get information. So you can go out there and say, I need a software engineer. What does that look like? So I couldn't tell you, but I'm sure if you did some research and compared some notes, you get some good technical questions. I think in larger companies, that's not really an issue because you have so many experts in their field.
And
but for small business
bringing them in.
owners, becomes a
Definitely.
little bit more. So,
Okay, thank you for that. And what would you say, what is your indicator of success if you had to judge like the quality of an interview? What would you say, okay, that's a measure of success. This is a good interview if that has happened. What is your success indicator?
It's almost like a gut feeling. And I think it's probably just years of experience, because I can almost say, this is the one. And I always kind of keep my opinion to myself. And I still do a little bit of recruiting for my former company. Not a lot, but a little. And I can still say, this is the one. It just feels like they're going to be the person that you can put right in that role and they're going to find success in it. How do I measure that? In the short term, it's very difficult because, how do you know? I mean, it's not an exact science, that's for sure. So I think it's just more of a gut feeling. Certainly, if more than one person interviews, it's nice if you all come to the same consensus. That's a good measure of success.
Yes. If there are more than one person interviewing, that helps to actually then make up your mind. You know what we once did in my experience? I had a co-interviewer once, and I said, okay, let's write our kind of conclusion in a piece of paper and then put it there on the table, and then we open it to not influence each other. That helped me personally because I didn't want to be influenced by the other person. And also I didn't want to influence saying, oh no, this person is not good or whatever,
Right. Yep.
And I think that's
that well? So important. I think that's so important because when I was working and we would have a couple people interview, we didn't discuss the candidate with anyone that hadn't interviewed yet. And then once we were all done interviewing, we get together and kind of, rank and file the candidates. And like I said, it's always exciting when everybody kind of comes up with the same candidate as their first choice.
That's so good. Yeah. If that happens, it's perfect.
Yes. But again, in a small business where you're kind of going more on your gut feeling and your just, this is what my business needs, I think, as you're growing, you got to kind of learn from experience and trust your gut. So,
the gut
and then
feeling.
Of course, long-term results, success is obvious if they, are successful in the role, or if they're not, and we have to kind of make some adjustments.
Yes, definitely. But actually, also what you say is important. I just want to underline the gut feeling. Actually, it's also an underrated one because it matters how you feel about being around a person. That was my experience as well. I mean, even if you recruit for a skill where you say, okay, I just need for 3 months a person filling in that technical role, even that for 3 months, these people need to sit in a room or sit in a video call together and get along
Yep.
somehow. And that is important. So the gut feeling works for that as well. How do I feel in the presence of the person? That is important for an interview, I find, because if you feel kind of like, oh, this person doesn't give me a good, feeling,
I
you
agree.
know what I mean? That's
Hmm.
important.
Yes, it's very important. You have to select people that you can work with and that others can work with. And if you're getting a kind of a bad vibe,
Yeah.
chances are it's not going to get better. I don't want to say it's never going to get better because I'm sure there
Yeah.
are cases when it does, but I think our gut is pretty true to us.
Reliable.
So yeah, yeah.
But on the other hand, what would you recommend to people who now say, I hear the viewers already saying, so, okay, what do you recommend me to not fall prey to that effect of the first impression? Because we've all had these shiny sales women coming into the room, making that huge impression on us. And then afterwards, it was nothing.
Mhm.
I had that experience, and I guess many people had that experience. So what would you recommend to that, to not fall prey to that? Oh my God, she looks wonderful. And then there might not be, the skill behind it.
Right. I think that's so great. So I kind of two things. One, there's a whole chapter in the book about
Oh,
interview
yes, I'm looking forward.
biases. So that's one of the biases is kind of that first impression,
Yeah.
and I can be very guilty of that because I've learned over the years I'm not great at first impressions. So that's why I like to talk to people to get to know them.
Ah, there we go.
So again, understanding the role that you're filling and what it's
Hmm.
going to take, what success in that role looks like is critical. And then understanding how to talk to your candidates, how to conduct an effective interview,
That
you
is
know,
where this point comes in. I would like you now to tell the viewers what is your learning from many, many years. You said to me that sometimes you watched interviews and you wished people had done this. What is this one thing that you recommend people do in interviews?
ask questions.
Ta-da!
Just ask questions. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love to have a conversation with people. It's wonderful and it's a great way to get to know people, but it doesn't really, I have a limited time in an interview. So if I have a 30-minute conversation
Hmm.
and I don't ask any questions to understand who you are, what your past experiences are, or what your current what you're looking for out of a company or out of your next role or what your skill set is or asking those technical questions. How am I going to know if you might be a great person and that's wonderful. I've met another great person. That's
Yeah,
great. But I don't
that's
know
the
if you can
point.
succeed in this role.
So
So I
that's
really want, yeah,
our number one advice, right? To ask questions and to prepare them in advance, to
yes,
be very
plan.
succinct about them, right? And to not fall prey to that. Okay, I get along with you, as you said before, just having a conversation, having a good feeling. Yes, having a good gut feeling, as you said, is important, but then you need to get to those questions to get to know the person more in depth.
Yep. And I have an example in the book again on that, where I fell prey to that and, ended up having to not only make a change with the person, but I damaged what could have probably been a decent relationship.
Mm,
Just the cost of a bad hire
yeah,
is far outweighs the cost of waiting a little bit longer to find the right candidate.
right.
So that's why I'm kind of, I'll commit to the process. I know it can be frustrating, it can be time
Hmm.
consuming, but if you look at the cost, when we make a hire, we assume we're done.
Yeah,
That's not always the case. If that's a bad hire or if we made a poor hiring decision, we're nowhere near being done.
yeah,
In worst case scenario, we're going to start all over again.
right.
So,
So thanks for
it's
sharing
really,
that. So you would say rather than rushing, saying inviting people to another round or inviting yet other candidates, right? In order not to rush it and say, okay, I'm not sure, but let's hire him. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So you'd rather say, let's take some more time and invest some more in that recruiting round.
I am absolutely not a fan of, well, they would be good enough. No, I don't want good
Ah,
enough.
yes. Oh, I've
You
heard that
know,
before. Yeah.
I would rather take more time, interview more candidates. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking for candidates, and it's just like the job search, that it goes both ways. It's all about timing.
Mm-hmm.
The right candidate could be the first one in the gate or could be the last one in the gate, and you don't
Oh,
know until
yes.
you meet them.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. So not to rush it is a really, really powerful advice. And what would you also say, what would you like to share with the viewers on one skill that interviewees should have? So what do you expect as an experienced recruiter of any candidate who applies for any job? What is the number one skill that an interviewee should show?
I think, because that's broad depending on the role. So I
Mm-hmm.
think one thing that every candidate should have is, you're going to show up to be interviewed for a job, be engaged in the interview.
Right.
Make some eye contact, pay attention. If you don't do just those basic things, I'm going to think you're not really that interested in the job. And why are we wasting each other's time if you're not?
Yeah.
So, don't waste time if you're really not interested. And if you are interested, be engaged, stay engaged,
Yes, and show
pay
interest.
attention.
Actually, I want to underline that one as well because it just reminded me, I've experienced that. I've seen candidates who walk into the room and they just had that one next invitation to this and they say, oh, okay, let's gonna do that. Let's find out. But they were not prepared and they
Mhm,
didn't know anything about the company. And they just
mhm.
walked in to see, let's check, maybe I get something, no engagement whatsoever. So actually
Yep.
once, that only happened once in my career, but I did that. I said, listen, I don't think there is mutual interest here. Let's just end the interview to
Yep.
save us that 30 minutes. And I ended it
Yep.
because I saw
Yep.
there was
I've
no
done that before too.
point. Well, no,
Yeah.
because sometimes it doesn't help.
It doesn't. And everybody's time is valuable. You
Yeah.
have other things to do. So, I even got to the point where if I would interview a candidate, and I knew that they wouldn't be a great fit, I would just end it there and not even have them interview with the other, like with the hiring manager or something, because
Oh,
I knew, I would save their time. And it's too late to
mm-hmm.
save my own time, but I would save their time, you
Yeah.
know. I was on my job long enough to know what would or wouldn't work. And if I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure, I certainly had the candidate go on through the interview. But if I was positive, I
Mm-hmm.
would kind of stop things. So,
Yeah,
and
because
they
the
knew that.
process.
I think they appreciated it.
Yeah, exactly. Because another hour saved in the long day of people.
Yep. Yep.
So exactly. Now, there is two more questions. So one is, what would you recommend in difficult situations? So like in situations where you feel like, oh, this interview is getting out of hand. What is a hack or some mindset hack that you would like to share with leaders who are watching this to say, okay, you use that to
Mhm.
get over that difficult situation?
Well, I think it's very easy to get off track in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I emphasize is asking all of the candidates the same questions. So
Hmm.
if you get off track, I think it's okay for a minute or two, and you may learn something about your candidate. So I don't want to discourage it, but you have to figure out how to rein things back in. So it's really just to be cognizant of time,
Mm-hmm.
and to if things kind of are going down a rabbit hole, find a good place to break in and let the candidate know, it's very important for me to get through a series of questions. So
Hmm.
if we have time at the end, we'll come back to this.
Oh, that's a
Because
very
it's not
nice
that
way
I,
of saying it. Yeah.
yeah, it's not that I don't want to hear it, but I do want to get through certain things, because I want to equitably evaluate my candidates.
Oh,
So
that's a
if
very
I
good way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really try to encourage interviewers to use their best way, whatever works best for you,
Hmm.
to rein the conversation back in, to kind of try to stay
Yeah.
on track.
and to say, okay, we just want to also cherish each other's time. Let's get to that later, but now let's focus on the questions. Exactly. I think also from my experience, it depends on the way in which you say it. And if you say it in a respectful manner, like you just did, I think every interviewee will understand, every invited guest will understand. And now, final question. What are the things that you are grateful for in terms of your career? What would you say, oh my God, that is also maybe for people who are watching this, who are aspiring to go to work into HR, what would you say are the things you're grateful for?
I am grateful for, I've learned from some great mentors, both in HR and then just in business. I've learned some hard lessons and some great lessons. And I learned, I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to work with people of such great minds. I'm grateful for this opportunity because I think the more we get to talk to people that share our interests,
Definitely.
It's wonderful just to engage in those conversations. I'm grateful that I worked for a wonderful company and I learned to me what the core value, in my opinion, of leadership is, and what makes great leaders, and how to build great teams, and how to hold teams accountable, and all of that. So all of those things, I have no regrets in
That
my
sounds
my
wonderful.
professional career.
That
Yeah.
is great. And actually, it is actually a motivating thing, what you're saying, for people who are thinking, maybe people who are younger and starting out on their careers, who are thinking, should I go into the corporate world or should I just start out my own business? And I personally would actually say, go out there and work a couple of years as well in the corporate life, because it, as you just said, it teaches so much about the dynamics of people, of how to work together in different teams, in different contexts. And you can get so much out of it, even if you want to be a freelancer. You can learn so many mindset skills.
Yes. You said that very well, better than I could for sure. But yes, I think you need that experience. I could have never done what I do today had I not worked out in the world all those years. I wouldn't have all these experiences and all those great mentors that I learned from. So, and some of them not so great, but you learn from them too, right? So
Exactly, you learn
I'm
from them
grateful
as
for them
well.
even.
Yeah,
They teach
definitely.
you things what not to do.
Exactly. And we are really looking forward to that book now. So that
Oh,
is
thank you.
coming
Me
up.
too.
I will definitely promote it. And so finally, let's just underline again, key takeaway from your book will be you will give a method, as I understand you, like it's a step-by-step method, what to do to conduct great interviews.
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Kind of. I mean, I'll have tear outs in there that you can photocopy. I have kind of a checklist of these are the
Oh,
things you
great.
really need to do. The pre-work before the
Mm-hmm.
interview starts. You need to know these things before you can
Ah,
talk to a
yes,
candidate about a
absolutely.
role. And again, as important as the interview is and the interview questions are, they don't have to be the ones I recommend. They have
Mm-hmm.
to be the ones that help you and the person you are learn about your candidates and your what's going to work best in your open positions. So,
So your book is going to help me find the right questions for myself, right?
well, I hope.
Yes. Okay. So
I'll
that's,
provide a framework and some sample
yeah.
questions. The questions that I've put in there are ones that have worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I like them, and the reasons why I like them were effective for me, but they may not
Mm-hmm.
be for you, but you can take a version of that
Yeah.
and
To
tweak it to
adapt.
make it your own. Mhm.
That is important. So you basically give people some examples, but then your advice would be to adapt them to the
Yep.
situation, to the role, and to your own style. And that is
Mhm.
so valuable because, yeah, interviewing is hard. I can just confirm. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward. And should I ever recruit somebody for my own business, I will definitely have you on my side. That is for sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I would be happy to.
That is for sure. So thank you very much, Christine, for this wonderful interview.
Thank you, Alex. It's been great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.